wanted to get into what we talked about before. Uh, my hot topic was kind of the way that standards have been lowered for singers over the years.
Hmm.
I'm 46 as of Friday, and even though I've listened to a bunch of music that my folks didn't listen to, I also listened to a bunch of music that they did listen to. And, I've got singers in my family and people in my family who aren't singers, but who are very critical of music. And
Hmm.
my joke was always like, I could sell a million records and they could point out a note that I missed and tell me about myself, and it would be true. And it's one of the things that's made me stronger and better is like having a critical ear. And I think the standards are so low that people just get excited over something that just wouldn't have passed muster back in the years. And my case for that is always Alicia Keys, which people get upset about. I mean, I know she's one of our own. I know she's a sister.
Yeah.
I think marketing for her is good because she's a sister that plays piano, which we don't see a lot, and she also happens to be a songwriter. Um, but as a singer myself, um, I just can't. I just can't get excited over Alicia Keys. For me, she's her last name works well for the fact that she plays piano, but she's like less than mid for me. Seems to be a nice person, and seems to have some skills writing songs. I think they would be better fit for people who can sing really well, which there have been people over the years who didn't write their own songs, but they could do incredible things to songs like, Whitney Houston and people like that. Um, so yeah, that's my hot take there.
Oh, I love her. I've loved her since day one. Um, but going back to what you were saying about like a degrading quality, um, and using her specifically as an example,
Hmm.
I'm thinking back to when she came out, and I really feel that in terms of her in a singularity of a talent, she just wasn't marketed that way. Like I don't remember her being like an entertainer where you're looking for her to dance and put on a show and sing and have great music, and I'm not really checking for her for this dynamic vocal performance, but I'm checking for her to be moved by a musical experience. And
Hmm.
and in that, I think she does a tremendous job. Like, and not just because in my mind she's my friend, but like in my mind, I don't know that lady, but
Yeah.
I think there's like a margin of artists that fit there, where you know um they're inexperienced, and so we look to them for that. I think she's shown a lot of shifts as she's gotten older,
Mhm.
from her first and second projects, and then third, especially once like the third moving on and she entered motherhood and she started diversifying even more. She grew up, and you know there you could hear a more diversity of influences in what she was creating. I think
Yeah.
she always showed that in performance, but
Yeah.
overall creativity was just something else. But she's like an anomaly, I think, in terms of this particular like conversation, because in general, I wholeheartedly agree with you. Like there's there's not a lot of newer music that I'm checking for. Like
Yeah.
so and so has a project out. Oh, I need to go hear that.
Wait,
And
who?
anybody,
Oh,
like,
oh, I see. Yeah.
yeah, and I haven't had that feeling in a while. Like there'll be some old favorites, whether it's regardless of genre, where I'll hear I'll hear there's something coming out like from another person referring it, or I'll look through social media for new music, and it's just like,
Yeah.
you know, I'm looking to be moved, um, and it's not for the volume of stuff that comes out. You're right.
Mhm.
I don't see the volume doesn't match the number of like good pieces that should be produced, especially now that production is comparatively easier or
Mm.
less expensive. There's, fewer things and conditions required to make a high quality product.
Yeah. Well, yeah, I mean, first, I love that I love that you're inspired by her, and that does make me think about, you know, what people use as criteria for what they're moved by, right? Like, I was saying, for example, Aretha Franklin gave her props for being a good songwriter,
Right.
right? Not a good, and she didn't say anything bad about her singing, but she just specifically gave her props about her songwriting, which I took as she was leaving the other thing out, not to show any hate, but to show exactly what she liked about her.
Right.
I think the thing about her, you feeling like she's your friend, I think that is one of those intangibles or things that um, labels and people that are good at marketing can do. She does have that girl next door that you root for kind of thing
Hmm.
going for you. Um, she's like a beautiful person, but she's not like overly glamorous where you feel like you can't, reach out and touch
Hmm.
her or that kind of thing. So I think she has that. She
Yeah.
has that, like, that young woman in your high school that made it that you kind of feel proud of kind of thing going. And she does seem to be personable and actually like a down to earth person. And she had her whole no makeup thing going. So like as a person, I like her. It's kind of interesting. Her husband now, um, and people have some interesting things to say about that dynamic and how they came to be. But I ain't one to gossip, so you ain't heard that from me. Um, but I put him in an interesting category too. Like he is a great businessman, and the whole versus thing he took to the next level and making sure he gave people ownership and things like that. But some of his music's been kind of mid to me too. You know, um, it tends to be like kind of repetitive. I don't like hearing his voice on records. I'd rather him stick to behind the boards. Anytime he does a hook, it's very repetitive and it's not like that's not very interesting to me. But he's got that thing that the hood likes, and he's made it marketable. So it's cool. So I think there's actually some interesting similarities between him and her that I never really thought of before. I think the difference is back in the days, you kind of had to have those other things that inspired you, but you also had to have the voice too.
Yeah.
I feel like black music has been a little bit different. Like going back, some of the white artists who were great songwriters, they could get away with not having great voices because of that other factor. You talked about inspiring people with their songwriting, and black artists never really had that. We always kind of like focused on the voice in addition to the songwriting.
Hmm.
And the first time I realized that when I was too young to notice it until my mom brought it to my attention. And then I started listening with a critical ear and I was like, she was right. My mom was criticizing Paula Abdul. She was like saying her voice isn't really that great.
No, it's not.
And I was like, when I first heard that, because, she's all on the radio and it's like, those songs are like all danceable and, the way that you love me and stuff. So I listened again. And I was like, oh, she's right. Her voice is like it's kind of like mid, but
If even, yeah, she sings out
but
her.
but the difference is she knows how to do certain interesting things with her voice. Like she knows how to stay in that pop dance pocket that goes well with the way she was being produced.
Yeah.
And here's the difference between her and Alicia. She never tries to sing out of her range. And
No.
like, if you don't have a great range, then you got to work some of your other skills. The last thing you want to hear someone do is hear an alto try to pretend to be a soprano. It's just, it's not good. It sounds like me when I first have woken up in the morning and I haven't warmed my voice up and I'm trying to hit notes and songs that I either shouldn't be singing until later in the day, or I should go through my vocal exercises or work with a vocal coach, or do the Macy Gray thing, who she has a very interesting voice, but she has a lower register and she
Right.
sticks to her lower register like a homegirl from TLC. Low, interesting voice,
Right.
does not try to jump outside of a register.
Right.
And I feel like, you know, an artist developer or like a serious producer, maybe more of a Quincy and less of a what's his name that we just talked about, her husband,
Uh-huh.
uh, Swiss Beats. Someone like a serious producer or vocal coach could be like, stay out of this range. You know what I mean?
Well, I mean, and using the examples you gave, I mean, I think they have two different motivations in performance. Paula Abdul's a dancer first and a choreographer first and a cheerleader 1st.
Mm-hmm.
And so she came out the gate with the intention of being a performer.
Yeah.
And so her singing probably is stylized around the intention of her doing a lot of movement, like high impact movement. She was a tap dancer too.
Mm-hmm.
And so she's doing like crazy combinations of things while still having to breathe and sing. And so that alone takes you outside of being still and getting enough breath to go outside of where you're supposed to be.
That's a good point for live performances, but the stuff that we're hearing and the stuff that's making them money and that's being monetized is on the radio.
Yeah.
So usually in that case, if you hear someone who sounds great on record and sounds doo-doo in person, it's because of the stuff that you're talking about. Like, it might be high impact performances and you're going to need a greater amount of breath control to hit those notes. And so maybe you have to make choices or have background singers, or some people, do that thing some of us don't like and just sing to tracks, which is whack. But on the radio, you can multi-layer tracks and do what you want to do. But if you can't hit the notes, you just can't hit them. But hey, at least you don't subject the critical listener to hearing struggle notes.
True. But I said that to say they're creating from two different starting points.
Yeah.
I think, and I don't know anything about either of their creative processes. This is just me guessing. And doubly for someone who would be classically trained on a percussion instrument to see music more broadly. She's creating music for the sake of creating music that she happens to sing later. And I think,
wait, who is this that you're talking about?
I think someone with that sort of interest creates music for the sake of creating music, and then they happen to sing it later. I think those
are Paula. You talking about Paula?
Oh no. No offense, but your example about the Keys or anyone who writes.
Oh, gotcha.
And even take it outside of music, anything, any sort of performative art, or visual art. If it's an art that's usable, and you having a certain understanding of the fundamentals of that process, they influence your process. It's like when I teach any skill to anybody else, and you create for the sake of creating, and then it happens to be something that's utilitarian. So
wait, so are you saying that the reason that Alicia Keys often sings out of her range is because she wrote these songs for other people and then later on decided to sing them herself, but never changed the keys?
I don't know that to be true. I don't know anything about her creative process
Good theory, though.
to speak.
Like that.
This is my theory. Yeah, but this is what I theorize because, you know, because of her relationship to music from a technical perspective or just from a creative perspective. She has a very different relationship. And so she may have something that, you know, she's in the creative process for, and then she honors that and then creates it and then happens to sing it.
Right, and then dishonors it by by singing it herself. The interesting thing is her last name is Keys, and it's like, well, there is something called a key change that's too high for you. You can transpose it and make it lower pretty easily.
Yeah, but now that we're thinking about this, because I never assign that to her. I always think of like, you know, a writer, producer, director who shall not be named, who likes to, you know, do all of their own things. But
Oh, wait, who shall not be named? I'm interested now.
no, it's nothing shameful. But I often think about that, like, you know, and these are very incredibly talented people who are good at something and
Hmm.
then okay at other parts of that whole
Wait,
production.
can I ask you who it is though? Because I'm
Oh,
curious.
Perry,
Who?
Tyler Perry.
Oh, okay. As far as movies and stuff.
Anything. I think his whole ethic is brilliant. And he's someone I admire. And I think that there are parts of that formula that are just amazingly successful. And then there's other I'm like, you know.
That's a very good comparison. Because I mean, I figure you're talking about, what he's writing versus the way that he acts in his own stuff, and then also the horrible wigs in
Oh,
his productions.
it could be any part of it because he does everything.
Yeah.
And and I get that. Um
And
I
he's got enough money to pay people who know how to make wigs. So at this point, there's no excuse. Like in the beginning, when he was getting it from the mud and it's like a shoestring budget, I can imagine horrible wigs. But
right.
at this point, this guy has like tens and tens of millions of dollars or more. And it's like, pay, some people who know how to put some wigs together at this point.
And I love this dude. And I wonder too if at this point it's kind of like a shtick. So he's like, I'm gonna keep rocking with it because people are looking for it. But
Yeah, maybe.
you
I
never
guess
know.
if it ain't broke, don't fix it. Though it's like, well, maybe it's a little bit broke, but you're still making it work. So
Oh, the
yeah,
male wigs are the worst. It's usually, and they'll be like classically handsome men, and they'll be like in a really bad wig. It's so hard.
oh yeah. They even put my man Snoop in a bad wig, and I think it was like BMF or something.
Really?
Yeah, it must have been. Yeah, he was in a bad wig, and it's like Snoop could have just rocked his own hair and like gotten his own perm, and he would have been good. And y'all had to put him in a bad wig.
I need to see this. Oh, he had the Afro wig.
I think so. Yeah, it might
Yeah.
have been an Afro wig. I think he was a preacher in BMF
Yeah.
or something.
Well, he
That
has.
wasn't even Tyler Perry unless he somehow got his hands on that production.
I didn't even see that. I want to see it. I saw a trailer for that. It
Yeah,
looked.
it's one of my favorites. BMF's is one of my favorites for sure.
Oh my
I
gosh.
actually ended up having a dream where Snoop was a minister over either a wedding or a funeral.
Really?
Funny, yeah. And I didn't even, when it happened, I had forgotten about BMF, and I'm like, oh, maybe that's where I got that from.
That's wild.
Yeah.
But yeah, I think that we're at an interesting age where we've seen a progression in a really short window of time and
Hmm.
how quickly things can turn over and be produced. And availability of like high quality products that can come out, and where we would be like really anxious and looking forward to projects being released like little by little because it took so much to get them done.
Yeah.
A deluge of things out in all media. It's not just music. And so it's like, I think you would have like dollar store DVDs, next to next to something else that you really have have an amazing sound to on all across the board.
Yeah.
Everybody's got the mic. I mean,
Right.
need for and the existence of gatekeepers is fledgling. Um, and they exist only to kind of like navigate the financials of it, and
Right.
that's secondary and tertiary products, not the actual art. So
Right. So yeah, a few things I wanted to address because you used the word like high quality production a few times, and it's like when I go back to Quincy Jones, Off the Wall, and Thriller, I can't think of higher production value than that, even though that happened decades ago. So whatever is happening with his ear is something similar that's happening to Dr. Dre's ear, where they can hear things and they can execute things in a way that's just like stellar, that's going to, keep going throughout time, right?
mm-hmm.
People should go back and always study them, and access to equipment and whatever is nowadays equipment doesn't always mean better. Maybe it means easier for more people to access it.
Right.
But what is the ear like? And so my problem is when we start, and you mentioned gatekeepers, when we start lowering our standards, particularly in Black music, where we've always had great singers or a certain quality, I feel like it down the line it leads to a degradation of the art form as a whole, because now we don't even know what's good anymore. Like prime example, it kind of infuriates me when people compare Chris Brown to Michael Jackson. Like, I can sing better than Chris Brown. I'm just gonna put that out there.
Yeah.
I can sing better than Chris Brown. Now I can't touch him in dancing. Right now, if you wanna compare Chris Brown to Michael Jackson or MC Hammer or Bobby Brown based on dancing alone,
yeah,
now I can agree with you. But the moment you talk about singing, I've heard the brother sing a couple of times, and after that, it's been all auto-tuned. So I couldn't even tell you how he can sing. Maybe that song "Run It" was like maybe his first one and the only one I liked. But other than that, it's so auto-tuned up. Yeah. I can't even hear his voice, his mistakes, his expression, his passion. And so to me, it's rhythm and bullshit. It's not rhythm and blues. There's no more like real emotion or feeling in it. But it's a vibe. People like it. I just like really get irritated with the comparisons. So just Chris Brown is the Chris Brown of whatever years he ran from, but he doesn't need to be compared to one of our greats.
No, I'm doing that, and that's just foolishness. I mean, and I think we often conflate like hustle with giftedness,
right? Right.
And also like legitimate training for hustle. Sorry, there's no way. There are some things where a skill-based education, a theoretical education, and then just straight up you are gifted can replace a grind. And it doesn't detract from a grind, but there are some people, and I think that's what makes it such a big deal when you do have these amazing creatives, and we get to enjoy their work for a long period of time across a broad body of work, and everyone cannot do that because they're not supposed to.
Yeah.
Michael Jackson is a one of one because that's what he was created to be. Just
Right.
like Prince and like you said, Quincy Jones.
Yeah.
Um, that's the creator's gift to us,
Yeah.
really.
Yeah.
And so for someone, and this isn't knocking, but you can't think you're gonna roll up one day without that giftedness or without that training or without that that understanding of, like we were talking about Alicia Keys's development,
Mhm.
skill development, without that part, and think you're gonna be on the same cachet, be among the same cachet of artists or creative.
Yeah.
It's kind of an insult, you know what I mean? Not kind
Yeah.
of, it's,
Yeah.
it's an insult.
Yeah, to me, it's a huge insult, and it's like these people, like you said, they have other gifts.
Yeah.
He's got the gift of hustle. He's got the work ethic. He puts out a lot of material, and he can dance his ass off. So those are great things, and obviously, there's something he's doing in the music that's resonating with people.
I
But
like, yeah.
but without the voice, to me, I just can't stand the comparison. And then the other thing is, those one of ones that you're talking about, did we ever compare them to anyone else? We probably didn't have to because they were one of ones, right? I mean, Michael was doing his thing since he was like 5 or 6 years old. He was like a child prodigy, as was Stevie Wonder. And so these people, they didn't have to be the next anything because they were themselves. Now, you might say he was inspired by James Brown, the hardest working man in entertainment, a great dancer. But a lot of people say he took what James Brown did to the next level and ran with it. Same thing with Tupac. Everybody wants to compare themselves to Tupac. Tupac was never compared to anybody. So the moment you compare yourself to him, you're not him because you're comparing yourself to someone who never had to be compared to someone else.
Right. And I think we're living in an age where we take true giftedness for granted and it becomes a participation trophy. Everyone is special. Everyone is not gifted.
Right.
and
Right.
and I think we really, in a time where the goal is to make everyone feel better, I think using the wrong methodology about in exercising or expressing their creative selves, it's shot us in the foot.
I would say it's darker than even that. It's not even really about making ourselves feel better about ourselves. It's just capitalism. It's just good marketing, right?
Yeah,
Jay-Z told us he was, better than Big or the closest one. At the time, I don't think he was. I think he eventually turned out to be the best,
yeah,
especially since Big isn't here. But I don't say that in a shady way like some people do.
right.
But at the time, it was just talk. I think it was self-fulfilling prophecy, and that's part of his gift. But on the capitalism side of things, like, we're living in the age of hyperbole. So Kanye wants to self-brand himself a genius,
Yeah,
and he did incredible things with music, not even talking about all of his nonsense, which we don't have to get into. He did incredible things with music, but it's like, I don't know how many geniuses go around calling themselves geniuses.
they
I
know.
feel like that's for other people to decide, right?
Right.
But now everybody jumps on that bandwagon and agrees, and it's kind of like we're kind of watering down meanings of things.
I'm 100% agree, and it's tragic because the people who are the true geniuses, all it does is push them to the back, or because typically these are people who already push themselves to the back. If we're looking at the personality and the psychology behind it, this culture sucks for really brilliant people, for legitimately brilliant people. It's not a great time.
Right,
It's a
right.
highly uncomfortable time to live in.
Yeah.
um is
We kind of uplift the basic, I think. Like, getting back to the thing you were talking about, the high quality of production, sometimes I go back and I listen to, they have these little Instagram videos where they show you, oh, this particular instrument was really big in the 2000s R&B. And it's like,
Ooh,
well, I bet a lot of that was the same producer that was proliferating a lot of stuff. and then it ends up being the case. But then a lot of copycats as well, right? Because they want to hop on a trend, they want to capitalize off of it, they want to market it, and it's like every song sounds like a particular song, you know?
It's true. It's true. It's true. I think a really interesting. I think we caught interesting periods though in music, in the 80s, where it was just like pan drippings. We're catching some tail end of disco or these
Yeah,
influences.
yeah.
So, and then we're getting rock was still like heavy on the radios.
Hmm.
Rap was really young and it was just like really hard, like break beats. Sampling
Hmm.
wasn't real heavy.
Hmm.
um, if you did, it was really familiar and overused, because then we got not High Life, what was it, what's the joint, TKO, anyway, we got that, and then we still have really good soul, and not
So
everyone.
you're talking about 80s?
80s, so we still,
Okay.
Gay was still alive, Luther was popping, like
Yeah.
you had to sing and the music was just phenomenal.
Yeah.
The soul and R&B was crazy because Motown was still popping. So
Yeah, that intersection of disco and R&B, I like to call post-disco R&B. You know,
yes,
that's all like that Evelyn Champagne,
yeah,
King, Patricia Russian, you
yeah.
know, all that stuff.
It was, we're so lucky, and so we know what it we have a whole different standard to know what's real, and we would know better than to compare
Yeah,
certain artists, because it's like you can't even tie their shoes.
for
Like,
sure, for sure.
okay,
And and then the other thing that I think was a little bit different from our era was like this thing that happened with Action Bronson and Ghostface Killer. So you know who Action Bronson is, right?
no, not a,
He's a big white guy from Queens.
okay.
He's a very good rapper. Some would say phenomenal. He came out in the mid 2010s, maybe a little bit later, but maybe around mid 2010s. Elephant in the Room. He sounds a lot like Ghostface. Okay. Now you remember Ghostface and Raekwon had that skit where they were like, "I don't want, you know, anyone sound like anybody from my camp." You know,
Uh-huh.
they said it a lot more colorful than that. Um,
Everything
and
says makes me laugh. By the way, I don't
what
know what,
what's that?
everything he says makes me laugh. I
Who,
don't,
Raekwon or Ghostface?
Ghostface. I don't
Oh,
know.
Ghostface. Yeah, yeah. So I mean, they were passionate. This was on a skit called Shark Biters or whatever. You know, their word for people who like bite your style. But a big thing in hip hop. It was a no-no in the '80s, no-no
Mhm.
in the '90s. But fast forward to the 2010s, these kids have no idea. And anytime I speak to someone, you know, 20 years younger than me, and I bring this up, they swear that Action sounds different, or they make the excuse that's his voice, he can't help it. So why is he talking about all the food stuff that Ghost talks about? Well, Action's actually a chef, so he can't help it. I'm like, none of those excuses pass muster. I always give Be Real as an example. That's not even his real rap voice. He doesn't talk nasally. He had to stumble upon that voice because they were trying to find something that sounded cool, and Sendog told him his normal voice sounded whack. So I say all that to say, like, nowadays you could sound like somebody else and even diss the person you bitch your whole style from. So he got into it with Ghostface, and they had these videos on the internet. Ghost has an incredibly entertaining video you should watch where he's playing Teddy Pendergrass in the background, and he's just kind of dissing Action Bronson because
I need to see this.
yeah, Action was on an interview, and you know, maybe he's a little bit green or he doesn't know, you know, how to handle questions, but someone asked about him sounding like Ghost, which he does, to the point where Ghost heard a song on the radio one day and was like, I don't remember recording that song. And that song ended up being Action Bronson. So even the man couldn't even tell the difference between his own voice and another person. to
That's
tell you, yeah,
wild.
to tell you how close they sound. But this interviewer asked Bronson a question about him sounding the same, and he starts saying, "Oh, Ghost hasn't sounded the same since back, so and so. He's not rapping like that anymore." Kind of like throwing a shot, kind of like trying to say Ghost fell off. So, you know, they kind of got into it. It didn't turn violent or anything, but it was just kind of interesting. But yeah, nowadays anything flies. People don't really care, and you know, they'll fall for the excuses. That's my voice. I can't help it. I sound exactly like somebody else that came out 20 years before me, and my lingo, and my cadence, and my rhythm, and my flow, and some of my subject matter sounds exactly the same. I
I
can't help it.
hate that. There was. I mean, there. I don't want to sound like one of those older people who be like, back in my day,
Yeah,
but like I used to love like 90s tried that era
yeah,
where you didn't know, it was like you didn't know what you were gonna, I mean, you knew the quality, you knew it was gonna be hot, so you were excited when these projects came out. But you, when you're picking from among a group, you
hmm
don't know what you're gonna get. It's like, you're gonna get great music, but you're gonna get something new. It'll be along a quality line that you'd expect from that group or that solo artist,
yeah,
but and it's gonna be them. Like, even if it's from the same production
hmm
house or company,
yeah,
all the artists are different.
yeah.
Like,
And the diversity was incredible. I mean,
yeah,
you had everything from like the Roots to us three to Diggable Planets to Wu Tang, Jay Z, Nas. Like, you had your Fugees. You
yeah,
had all the conscious stuff that was popular.
they were all different, and
Yeah,
it's like I love that. I love that.
yeah,
I loved it, and it was all, and it was really, really good.
yeah.
You know, I I really tried to enjoy like some newer things in real time. So you go out with the intention of, I'm gonna sit or I'm gonna be in this party or whatever, and I'm gonna listen to whatever this is, and I'm like,
Right, right. Yeah,
I can't really tell them, most of them apart. So I'm asking like, who is this? Who is this? But then like at some point it's like, oh, I'm good. Like,
yeah. Or you get excited. You can listen to something in a particular vein, like maybe you're in somebody's whip, or maybe you're at a party and you hear some trap. Then you try to listen to the same stuff in your headphones when you're just like, on the bus or the train, and you're like, I can't listen to this now. Like, it's not. It was good for a very particular moment, like when I was doing a particular thing, but
yeah.
I can't listen to this just like in a totally different zone. It wasn't like our music where you could listen to it in different places like that.
No, it's not even it's not even fully the the typology of it. Like,
Hmm.
because I love listening to like New Orleans bounce, but of
Yeah.
like a New Orleans bounce version of R&B. Like my mother hates it because I'll do like Anita Baker,
Okay.
but it's New Orleans bounce. She
Yeah,
be
Stevie did something. Stevie Wonder did something. I think live over some New Orleans bounce. It was making its
yes,
rounds on Instagram.
yes, I loved it. It was like,
Yeah.
so it's not even like genre. It's just the whole thing. Like, it's like, oh, just
Speaking of which, Michael Jackson was trying to get beats from Pharrell,
yeah.
and Pharrell was sending him stuff that he thought sounded like Michael Jackson stuff, and he was like, "No, no, no, I want stuff like you did for like Noriega, like like that what song, like that's what he wanted."
Imagine.
Yeah,
I can't even imagine. Like,
it
I
makes sense for Michael though. Michael was always like trying to be like ahead of the curve, so it
yeah.
makes sense.
Oh yeah, that was really he and Prince. It was such an incredible loss.
Oh yeah, for sure, for sure.
Yeah, yeah. But I don't know. I wonder as we watch the technology shift and we watch consumption trends shift. I'm curious. Other than people who are purists, because they have their fault in being purist as well,
Yeah,
and people like old heads, which we're almost among them.
yeah.
Like, what's gonna happen in general to the overall quality of what we're calling entertainment? Um, I, I'm really curious about what that's gonna look like in just a few years, in 5 years.
I mean, my prediction is if I mean what I've seen is like so we were blessed where in the '90s the music on the radio was actually dope underground music that made its way through the radio, and then as we got into the when I look at the years and I actually am critical of years of hip hop,
Mm-hmm.
you look at like '90 through '98, they're all incredible albums. It's hard to say which year is the best. Then you
Right.
get to '99 and there's a sharp dip.
It's true.
Right? There's a very sharp dip in '99
Yeah.
where now all of a sudden it's either underground or it's on the radio and it's kind of like commercial. And you might have to listen to certain DJs in New York City on certain nights to get
Right.
like stuff that you actually like. So
Right.
if it does continue to get whack, there's going to be dope stuff, but it's going to be underground and it's going to be, coming out of the culture like where it started in the first place before it got commercialized.
I think you're right. And I've never thought about it that way. And that's the most logical sense. I think with that, there also has to be a culture revived where those venues are able to sustain.
Yeah,
Um, when we're looking at where live music is going in terms of affordability
right.
and accessibility, it's crazy.
Yeah,
Like, it's really, really insane. And it's not something that's unique to larger cities, just across the board. And
yeah.
the price of actual production is nuts to be able to host these things. But I think models like so far. Have you been to any of those events?
What events?
So far events?
So far, I don't think so, but I'll write it down.
They're
Is
fun.
that are those national events or?
They're international now. They when they
Okay.
started, I think it was just like one or two cities. New York was one of them. And what it is, um, you buy a ticket. It's very nominal cost.
Okay.
Don't know the venue and you don't know who's performing. You just know the genre that you like.
Okay.
It's at a typical venues. Um,
Okay.
an art gallery. It might be someone's backyard. It might be a house.
I like that. I know someone who runs events who's actually given me a few gigs who's like doing actually I'll be going there tonight to perform at the open mic, but I know someone who'd be very very interested in that. I'll ask him if he knows about it and tell him about it. But that thing about backyards, like I have a friend who just moved into a beautiful place in this neighborhood, and his apartment's very big and multi-level and has like a backyard portion to it where he wants to do events. So that would be pretty dope.
Yeah. Well, you connect with this company, and as a patron, you buy your ticket and the date. You know the date and the time. That's it. I think a day or two before they release the actual location, because you'll know the neighborhood, right?
Yeah,
They'll release the actual location, and then you get there and it's just people who love music.
that's dope. That's
And
dope. I'm gonna
yes,
get on that right away.
yes,
Sure.
the big name artist. Sometimes it's someone who's on the way up, and sometimes it's just some person starting out. But
Yeah.
it's always a good vibe. It's beautiful.
And you've been to several of those in New York?
Yeah, I love them.
Okay.
I love them. I
Yeah.
think at this point, I think it's 7 or 8 years old,
Okay.
um, running, and I think the model is just, it makes so much sense. um for everyone, you
Yeah.
know.
Well, that's kind of like what I'm getting at. It's like it's almost like a non-profit kind of like model, or like just making it cultural, and like making it, anyone can plug in, especially based on their skill level, and it's more about just like networking and trying it out and getting as much practice as you can. That would really fit in well here. So I got to see if that's going down here, because I know some people who could take advantage of that quite well.
Oh yeah, it's just lovely. It's lovely, and the nature of it sort of excludes anyone who wouldn't be in full appreciation of just experiencing
Right,
good,
right.
and I happen to love that part the most.
So
So you're
no knuckleheads, you mean?
friends.
What's that?
You're among friends.
Yeah,
So
yeah, yeah. Yeah,
yeah,
that's dope. I like that.
yep.
I like that. Well, speaking of which, I'm gonna check out Cafe Negril, because one of the talented uh, comedians who's been actually doing it for decades here invited me to Cafe Negril, which is up to this point been a music open mic, but he wants to open it up to comedians, so we could be like the first comedians to actually start doing their open mic there.
Oh, the one in the village, the city?
Cafe Negril. Well, I live in New Orleans now.
Right.
Oh, Cafe. Yeah, Frenchman. It's on Frenchman. Yeah,
Oh, so it's there where you are.
yeah, yeah.
Nice.
They have a Cafe Negril in the village too.
Oh, there used to be two. There's one in Chelsea and one in the village. One in Chelsea, I think, closed. The one in the village has been open for years.
Okay, okay.
Um,
Word.
they used to do live music. I think Fridays. I don't know about comedy because I was about to say, "Oh my God, I'm coming," but
Wait, live music, but not like an open mic, you mean?
I don't know. You check the website.
And you said the one that's still around is in the village, you said?
Yeah,
Okay, because
it's
that's where I'm going to be crashing when I come in this weekend. I'm going to be in New York from the 15th to the 17th. I'm going to be
oh
crashing in the East Village.
oh, this is on LaGuardia. I think it's LaGuardia. The LaGuardia and Third, I think. Um,
Okay.
but I'll send you. And there Groove also. The Groove in the West Village. The Groove is on West Third. They
Okay.
have Mike.
And there should be a few places where I can at least I don't remember Saturdays being a big day for comedy in New York, but that could be not true. I could have just not been finding it, but I definitely know of at least one place on Friday that I should try to perform at. But I'll look for other places too. But yeah, if I perform on Friday, I'll let you know if you're open, if the schedule is open.
Very cool. There
Yeah.
is one more I know about. I sent it to someone else. Um I'll find it and I'll forward it to you. Very exciting.
Cool.
Very,
All right. All right, great. Well, this has been a great episode. I always love talking about music and talking ish about some of people's favorite stuff. Next time we can do part two. You can bring up Brian McKnight, and we can upset some
oh,
more people about your hot takes on Brian McKnight.
sounds good.
All right, sounds good.
You have a good night.
All right, you too. See
Good
you.
night.